Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and I just wanted to look really quickly at a patch preview for 1020. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. We stream every night starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time, go till about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on YouTube. So come by, check that out. Very friendly community, very chill. I try to talk as much as I can with the chat while I'm playing, so it's explaining stuff that's going on in the game and also just talking about whatever other random things people want to talk about in the chat. And then we do lots of guides like this all the time as well. Fresh patch notes, fresh tier lists for every patch. Then we have lots of topical guides like best one trick, how to micro better, how to macro better, what is toxicity in League, what is luck in League, how to overcome those things, what is dodging, when should you dodge, all of that kind of stuff, and much, much more. Just dozens and dozens of guides, so be sure to check all that out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So most of these are probably going to go through. This is a tweet from the lead designer, and this is how they've been doing it lately. It's just sort of letting you know what's going on, and this has been pretty accurate for the most part. This is more accurate than the old Surrender at 20 used to be in terms of design. So the vast majority of these things usually end up going through, although a couple of them do get dropped. So be sure to check out the official patch notes next week when it releases, but I think it's always fun just to kind of talk about what some of the upcoming changes could be. Okay, so Samira, it doesn't mention Samira on here, but she did get hot nerfed as well, so I'll mention that first. She got 70 HP reduction, so from 600 HP down to 530, and then I think they took off most of her base damage. They may have taken off, it was a lot of base damage, like maybe 30 base damage and then 100% total attack damage. So it was like 30 base with 600% total attack damage at level 6 and then went up from there. And I think they took it down to 0 base damage with 500% total attack damage. Now, total attack damage includes your base AD that you have. So if it's bonus attack damage, it does not include your base AD. Total attack damage does. So it's still a lot of damage on her ult, but she's a lot more vulnerable in the early game. I think overall, from what I've seen in most games, the vast majority of the player base is not that great on her. But the people who are good, she can feel very strong and potentially oppressive if they are good on her, but it's a big if. So it is very high skill, high risk, high reward type of champion. So I think she'll probably get some additional nerfs in the future once people learn how to play her a little bit better. And they've said that's kind of their design philosophy on high skill cap champs, is to make them a little over the top stat wise while people learn them. Then as people get better at their mechanics, then they dial back their numbers to compensate for that. But they don't want the champion to come out with low numbers and difficult mechanics and have like a 20% win rate or something of that nature. So the really high skill cap champs are going to be way over the top in the hands of skilled players on release, as sort of the normalized player base learns it, and then it dials it back over time. So I think they've said that's kind of their approach. I think that's okay. Some people are like, oh, they're just trying to sell skins or sell champs and make money and stuff like that. It's like, maybe. I mean, she's one champion among 160 champions out there, right? So it's probably like, yes, it's probably a little bit of that, but it's probably a drop in the bucket compared to, as far as money wise, like they, you know, their light bill is going to be just fine. If they didn't sell any Samira stuff, they would be okay. So anyways, I don't really buy into that argument that they're doing it just for the money. I think that that's a deliberate choice to make her numbers a little strong because she's hard to play. And then once again, as people learn her, then they'll dial it back a little bit. And frankly, I would rather something like that than just release like Garen 2.0, you know, and that's basically set, right? Where something that's like super easy to play compared to some of the other like more complicated champions. So something that's like very straightforward that also has really strong numbers that they don't nerf for a long time. And it's just like very consistently powerful, right? So I'd rather there be something like a Samira than something like a set getting released again. Okay. So what are they nerfing on this patch? So Relentless Hunter is getting a nerf, so the out of combat movement speeds, that's the OOC there, going from 10 to 5 at the base level, and then getting 9 per stack. So basically it's going from 9 to 45 now instead of 10 to 55. I believe, so 5 stacks, yeah, it would be 45. Yeah. That's basically it. So they're taking 5 off the base and 5 off of a fully stacked version. So who is it? So this is the primary users of this. Nunu is up there a lot. So Nunu gets this with the Phase Rush Nunu build, which is becoming super popular. Pantsar Dragon, who's #1 on the North American server right now, has been spamming Nunu to get up there. He can play a lot of other stuff too, pretty well, but Nunu's getting a lot of extra attention because of him. So this will hurt that build a little bit. However, he does already go over the movement speed cap with his snowball, especially if he's on a shrine, especially if he builds Dead Man's Plate, which is fairly common on him. So it's like, yeah, he is losing 10 movement speed, but he's already so far over the cap. He's definitely going to be in soft cap territory, which means it's going to be reduced. His speed's going to be reduced by 30% anyways, the additional speed. So it's like, instead of losing 10, it's really closer to losing somewhere between like 4 to 7, depending on how far over the cap he is. Is that really going to make a huge difference in that snowball coming at you? Like, maybe. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. In the early game where it's the biggest thing, losing to 5 movement speed. You got to remember that that's out of combat, though, too. So when he's running from camp to camp, it's rare that he's going to be out of combat when he's on the same side of the jungle. So when he's clearing, like, blue to Gromp to wolves, he's pretty much always going to be in combat. So it doesn't affect his movement speed in that way. But on those early ganks, it could matter a little bit. Or when he's, like, running back to the jungle from fountain or, you know, something like that. Yes, he might be a few seconds slower. So it's going to add up. You know, maybe in the early game he loses a total of, like, 5 to 10 seconds or something on his movement. But he's already really strong. So I don't think it's going to matter as much there, sort of. Bard is another one who uses this a lot, who's very strong right now. This might affect Bard a little bit more because Bard doesn't go in combat when he's roaming around as much as something like Nunu. So when he's going to, and he doesn't go over the cap either as much as Nunu does. So like when Nunu's snowballing with all that other, you know, stuff, right? The celerity, the water walking, all that stuff, he's going over the cap. Bard is not going to go over the cap as much. So it's going to matter more for Bard when he's going to try to collect those chimes. You know, it's going to take him potentially a few extra seconds to get back to lane. Maybe 2 or 3 extra seconds, and your ADC could die in that time, you know? So, or you could arrive just a little bit slower to, you know, a skirmish in the jungle, and that could make a big difference. So, this might affect Bard a little bit. Bard does have other options, though, depending on your build path. I mean, if he's going for something like a Shirelia's Redemption build, then he, in theory, could get something, you know, if Relentless Hunter is completely going out of style, then he could get something like an Ingenious Hunter or something like that and just go back to mobility boots for the extra movement speed. So, I don't know. We'll see. So, it's definitely going to nerf Bard. Definitely going to nerf Nunu a little bit. Nunu, I think, probably not going to move the needle that much on him. Bard might move him down like half a percentage. It's more significant on Bard. And I can't really think of that many other ones that are like super notable that have to have this rune. I mean, if we go to I mean, I'm sure there's going to be someone that I'm overlooking here, but those are kind of the biggest ones out of the jungle that would use Relentless. Hecarim might use it. Does Hecarim use it? No, Hecarim doesn't really use it, at least not in his like main build. So there aren't that many champions that are going to be affected by that. What does Nunu? Does Nunu have a secondary? Pretty much everybody's going to go Relentless on him, but I wonder like what the win rates are. It's going to be a little bit skewed just because it's like the people who are getting this are going to be kind of the more knowledgeable Nunu players in general are going to be getting this. So it doesn't necessarily mean that something like Relentless Hunter is bad. It's just that like people that it could be that, but it could also be that people are getting Ravenous in general are not as informed as people who are getting Relentless right now. So is this? I don't know why there are two different things, if this is primary or secondary, but whatever. I think it'll be fine. And I can't, like I said, there might be someone else that would get it, but offhand, I can't think of anyone else. Maybe Rengar. No, he does Conquer. If it was an Electrocute Rengar build, I could see that with his ult, maybe. But I think the vast majority of other champions, like maybe Warwick or something, Yeah, Warwick gets it as well, who has a pretty good win rate. Because that combos really well with his percentage movement speed increase off of his W. So yeah, there's a couple of champs that would get it. You know, maybe Rammus wants it. Actually, Rammus doesn't even get it. But overall, I think it's mostly just Bard and Nunu as far as meta champs, and I think they'll both be okay. So that's all right. Karthus armor is going down by like 3, and then base HP regen is down, so this will make you more vulnerable in the early game. So you're going to be, and I don't know how this is going to translate into health. I always feel like 3 armor doesn't really matter, but then sometimes the 3 AD, meme, or the 3 armor meme can actually be a really huge deal. So if Karthus gets like, if this makes him so low that it's just way too dangerous to even try to get a scuttle in the early game, maybe that makes a bigger difference. Or this would matter a lot more at lower elo brackets as well, because if you don't kite the camps as Karthus, now you're going to get hard punished. But there are some camps that are like extremely difficult to kite as well. So like Raptors are just going to beat you up, early game. Because they're just so fast, you can't really, you can kind of kite them, but they're going to hit you a lot. Until you get a lot of AP to just take them down. So we'll see. They did nerf Karthus. They made some changes to Karthus a few patches ago that kind of brought him back into the meta a little bit, and they nerfed him out of the meta earlier in the season. So we'll see. So I really don't think Karthus is that impressive. People complain about him a lot, especially in kind of higher elo brackets. But as far as win rates go, he's 52, so it's not like he's that far out of control. So I don't know. We'll see. Probably fine. He's not really a healthy champion to have in the jungle anyways, I don't think. Just like power farm, like guaranteed. There is some skill to him with hitting the Qs and stuff like that. So I guess he's an interesting AP option. But I'm not like super sad if he's not in the meta. And I don't think a lot of other people are either. Except for Karthus mains. Maokai. Now, this is one that might surprise some people, but Maokai is extremely strong in multiple roles right now, so I'm not really surprised that they're nerfing him a little bit more. Like, he's got one of the highest win rates, probably the highest mainstream top laner right now, win rate-wise, is Maokai, right? So he's got a 5% pick rate and a 53.5% win rate. Most of these other champs up here are way lower, right? You have to go down to Urgot until you find someone else who has a decent pick rate. Urgot's got like a 4% pick rate. And then it's really Shin, who has like the 9% pick rate. But Shin is like a full percent lower than Maokai in terms of win rate overall. So I'm not really surprised that they're nerfing Maokai a little bit. And I think this is an interesting way to do it, is to nerf his mid-game damage and mid-game wave clear. So he does get Sunfire, which is going to help out with his clear, but this, knocking 20 damage off is pretty significant on the Q because it does hit multiple targets and it is spammable. It's like a 5-second cooldown. He's not being played a lot as support, but I think he's a decent support right now. And top lane, he's definitely really strong. So he still has a lot of the CC. He has a lot of what makes him strong. He's just not going to be able to do as much damage. So I think that's probably a decent choice. Did they have to nerf him? Probably not, but it's probably not a bad idea. Kled, his magic resist is going down. Feels a little random. Kled's win rate's okay. It's like 52.5. I think, if they were going to nerf somebody, I think they should have nerfed Shin more on this patch. Sorry, Sammy, but, Shin is just really oppressive. It feels like he's in almost every game. And he's just too good at one-on-one fighting for just how strong he is in split pushing and even in team fights. Like, he brings a lot to the table. He obviously has his ult, just like a free teleport with a big shield on it. But then he also has like that auto attack block, with his W. He's got an AoE taunt. He just does a hell of a lot of damage by himself with his empowered Qs. So he's just really, really strong. So I would have nerfed Shin just because he has such a high play rate and has such a high win rate. But they've chosen to nerf Kled and Maokai, and those are both two potential competitors for Shin, so Shin's getting buffed by comparison. The Kled just seems really random. He's such a bizarre, random champion. Like, there's only got a 2% play rate. So he's good. It's not that he's bad. It just seems like, I don't know. They're just nerfing the magic damage. They're like, okay, we want Kled to be more vulnerable to Malphite top. That will make him more vulnerable to Shin, because Shin's a lot of his auto attacks are empowered. And I guess Maokai, you know, a lot of his damage is magic too. So I don't think it's going to matter that much, but I just also don't think it was necessary to nerf him. Nunu's armor is going down by 3. So once again, kind of like with Karthus, I'm not sure how much this is going to affect his clear. Now, it is worth noting that Nunu does heal for a heck of a lot in the jungle as well with his Q. So, I don't... And he has a very safe clear. I mean, if you just use one smite, you know, well, I use... often will use 2 smites when I'm going through in the jungle, just to kind of power clear faster and try to get 5 camp into Scuttle and just try to pick the Scuttle where they're not going. But if you do that, you're basically full health when you walk out of the jungle. But even if you don't, if you get a nice leash in the bot side, even if you don't use your second smite, you're still coming out of the jungle with like 75 or 80% health a lot of the time. So I think he's going to be fine. It will make him a little bit more vulnerable to invades by physical damage dealers, by like a Lee Sin or a Zhen Zhao or something like that. Kha'Zix, Rengar later on. But he should still be fine. I think if anything, you know, the Relentless nerf plus this nerf maybe drops him down 0.5%, but I still think he's going to be really strong. Katarina, now I'm not sure. Let me check her ratios real quick. This is definitely going to be a nerf to her. Now, she doesn't get... This is going to hurt her Death's Dance build, which is like a really common... not like... People don't get it every game, but it's a decent sort of defensive option if you want a little bit more survivability for team fights. I think Death's Dance in general is just a super toxic item. Like, it's terrible design. It just does way too much. Like, having an item that has like really strong defense on it and pretty respectable offense... So it's got the lifesteal, it has the 30-30 defense, the delayed damage, and 50 AD on it is just too much. Especially in these weird corner cases, like someone like Katarina getting it. But her ratio right now is at 100-100. Okay, so it's actually less. So it's 100% bonus AD, but it has scaling. Okay, so this is actually a little bit more significant than I thought it was. So the base damage at level 6 is 96 damage, and then it's 66% of your total AP, which is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 100. Like once you complete your Gunblade with your runes and stuff like that, it might be a little bit more. But I'm just thinking like, and you won't complete your Gunblade a lot of times until after level 6, but just for the sake of simplicity. So you're getting 66 damage here. Plus, this would be, you know, roughly like 160. Let's call it 150 damage for easy math. And then you're getting 40 AD off of Gunblade. And reducing that to 75% is going to reduce 10 damage off of it. So that's 1/4 off. So you're losing 10 damage on this. That would be 30. So we'll just say it's 200. So you're losing like 10 damage if a dagger, once you get your Gunblade, is going to do, roughly was doing 200 damage. Now it's doing 190. So that's like a 5% damage reduction early on. So that's pretty significant because you do you get a lot of these daggers in fights. I mean, I'm not a cat one trick, but I would say this probably goes off. Like, you probably get at least 3 daggers to go off if you're killing somebody. Because you've got your bouncing blade, then you've got prep, and then I think like there's resets and stuff like that go on there as well. So I feel like this is probably going off 2 or 3 times. This is kind of a longer cooldown. What if you catch the dagger? I don't remember. It like lowers her cooldown or something like that whenever she catches the dagger. I think she can throw it again. Blinking to it. Anyways, it's not a Katarina video, but daggers take 1 second to land and disappear. But either way, so I think she, in the early game, the bottom line is I think she's losing about 5% damage. That will hurt her ability to snowball really hard. Because the only AD item that she's probably like, Gunblade is the main one. It has 40 AD on it, so that's 10 damage gone. And then, like, she might take AD runes early. She could take AP runes instead. And then maybe Death Stance second. But, you know, stuff like Leandri's, stuff like Death Cap. I don't think that getting Hourglass is a good idea second, but like Leandri's and Death Cap are both like pretty reasonable, and Death Stance is like 3,500 gold, which is in the ballpark of both of those items as well. So I think she has other alternatives to Death Stance. She doesn't have to buy that item. She does have to buy Gunblade, so it's pretty much a guaranteed she's losing 10 damage per dagger. So I think ultimately she'll be okay. I mean, it's going to hurt her on first item a little bit. And I don't know, maybe it is just a game of inches, right? Maybe if she just can't quite convert those kills, if people walk away with 30 damage enough, then maybe that's a very big deal. But I feel like this is not going to be like the end of the world. Maybe 0.5% down, but I think she'll still be good. Now, the Lulu change that they're making, and he did clarify, it's basically 10% off of Lulu's Whimsy. So the thing that buffs the attack speed, you're losing 10% attack speed on that. So he said in a later tweet what that is. I think that's pretty significant for Lulu because she has the built-in picks, which is where you're doing in the mid-game, you know, once you get your Ardent Sensor, you're probably going to end up doing like 80 damage, giving someone 80 on-attack damage. So losing 10% off of that is quite a lot. And then you usually have the synergy with Ardent Sensor itself, the on-hit damage from that, and then a lot of the times the champions she's buffing up, like Twitch, Kog'Maw, things like that, are also going to have a lot of benefits to really fast attack speed if they have Gensus or Bork or Mirror Mana or whatever. So that's quite a lot. That's a lot of her power is the attack speed buff that she gives to somebody. So I think she might end up losing 0.5% to 1% off of this. She still does have a lot in her kit, though, right? She still has her shield, which is on a low cooldown, 8 seconds, versus Janna's 16-second early shield. She can use it offensively. She can use it defensively. It's still really low range at 650. And she still has her polymorph option off of her W for the 2.25 seconds, and her ult's still intact. So I think she'll still be a pretty good champ, especially when paired with someone that she works really well with, who wants a lot of the attack speed, like Twitch, Vayne, Jinx, Kog'Maw, that type of stuff. But it will bring her down a little bit. Okay, so buffs. Aatrox, the healing at max level is now up. So it's 50 to 100%. So presumably it goes to like, it's going to go to 75 at level 11 instead of 60. So at level 6, it looks like it's the same. At level 11, that's quite a bit more. It's 15% more healing. And then 100% at level 16. So it's going to make him a lot better at later levels. I'm not 100% sure what's holding him back. I've seen some really good Aatroxes lately, but he is kind of a rare pick, and he doesn't seem to have like a huge win rate. It's not that bad. It's like 49%. I think people just kind of forgotten about him, honestly. But I think that he probably can still be pretty good if you're good on him. So that's okay. He's an interesting champ to have out there. There is counterplay to his kit, especially with all the mobility running around out there. So I think he's an interesting champ to have in the meta overall. So that's fine. More tentacles later on by champ level. Now, these are randomly spawned tentacles, so these aren't the ones that you put out by yourself, or that you choose to put out. I don't think that's going to make a difference. Or, you know, Alawi's basically just like, does the enemy team group up around you and get hit by all of your tentacles on your ult or not? I feel like that's what it is. So the enemy has just so much counterplay to her kit. I've seen Alawi's take over the game and be super frustrating, especially once they get Death's Dance and just do a ton of damage, but she's a very situational champ. I think she requires the enemy to have a lot of melee and to either opt into staying close to her or to be like chain CC'd close to her with something like an Amumu or a Jarvan or a Hecarim or just something else that can like group people together and keep them still. Orianna. But I still think she's going to be pretty fringe because she lacks mobility, and like I said, a lot of people can just like run away when she ults, right? They can opt to not fight her. Okay, Now these are two of the more interesting ones. They're trying to do Scion jungle here, so Q does an extra 150% to monsters, so it does a lot of extra damage. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. You get a fully charged Q. I mean, that can probably really hammer, like, some early game raptors or, like, the golems or wolves. So, I'm not sure how much that's going to affect your clear. I feel like he's going to do single target camps really slowly. So, that seems like... I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that good. I'll put it that way. It's okay, but it's just like, what are his ganks look like, especially without your ult up? You literally just walk at them, you know? I guess you can bush them, right? So if you get a fully charged Q out of a bush or something, if you lane gank, like, that can be pretty strong. But I don't see why you would play Scion over something like Nunu or Hecarim as sort of your tanky options that probably do more consistent damage and just bring a lot more to the table. Or even something like a Zac. I just don't know why you would want Scion jungle, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's an OP build out there, lethality Scion jungle or something. I just don't know, but it doesn't seem like it's good. Now, the Urgot one, this one is a bit more interesting, and I've actually played Urgot jungle a decent chunk on my Smurf. I was just trying him out, and honestly, it wasn't that bad. The biggest thing really was the clear, in that it was taking a little while to get your clear, especially before you get your Q evolved. Now, some of that is his movement speed is kind of low, but there may be ways around that, right? I mean, if he could opt into something like Boots of Swiftness, that would certainly help out quite a bit. Maybe he's too squishy if you do that, I don't know. But it was definitely the early game clear, because like his team fight's really good, and he brings a decent chunk of utility, right? Like his ultimate is it's like a 4-second slow, like a big slow. And then of course you can execute people with it too, but people forget, like, it's actually a decent ganking tool, because if you snipe somebody with that from a long ways away, not only does it have the execute, but it's going to allow the rest of your team to catch up to him and potentially kill him, and it's a pretty low cooldown. Then of course his W just does a crazy amount of damage in team fights if left unchecked, and he's tanky. So yeah, his engage is not like insane. You could get something like Righteous Glory to maybe help out with that, or Predator or something. It seems like there could be some options. Phase Rush might be really good on him. Let me see. What are people doing on him, actually? Is he converted over to Phase Rush yet, or is he still on that Conquer? PTA, I guess. And then Death's Dance is very good on him. So I think there's a lot of options that people could explore that could make him a little bit more viable. So they're giving him an extra 100 damage, 100 to 360 damage on the passive. So that's shotgun legs. That's a lot of extra damage on those shotgun legs early on, especially. And that's monster. So you can deal... now the cap. So is that the base damage or is that the cap damage? Like the maximum damage? I'm not sure. But the minimum damage of 50 seems pretty legit as well. So, I don't know. We'll see. If this does help his clear out, which those numbers look pretty big, right? Minimum 50 and then the extra maximum damage. If he gets a faster clear early and he can just kind of like get up to that mid game, because he can brawl some people too, right? If he gets that flip on somebody, he can do quite a bit of damage in a duel early on if you're itemizing him for duels. So, especially if he's taking press the attack, that's a lot of damage in the early game. So, I don't know. This is one of the more interesting changes to me because I think he has the kit for it, and I think he could work as a jungler. I mean, he can even take stuff like Dragons and Barons, like, decent, right? Once you get your W all the way up, and you can just machine gun them down. Like, you do decent damage to those things. Not as fast as something like a Master Yi, but still, like, decent damage. So that's interesting. Ryze getting 10 extra damage on his Q. That seems pretty significant to me because that's what he maxes first. And I don't remember how that interacts with the rest of his kit in terms of like spreading the stuff around with his E. And Ryze has been changed so many times, but he casts that Q a lot. So that seems like a pretty big damage buff. It seems like he is potentially... it seems like he's potentially stronger than people think he is right now, too. Or at least he has the potential if you're really good on him. So I think that's an interesting buff. He's still really strong. I mean, part of why he's out of the meta right now to some extent is he gets double charge items. So he gets tier plus Rod of the Ages. So that's partially why people don't play him. So I think he's still pretty good. Oh, and I just noticed that when I was mentioning double charge items that I forgot Kassadin. I just completely jumped over Kassadin. So I'll just mention him real quick. So as far as like the Q shield is going down at lower levels, this can matter, especially in some of the matchups that are relatively even against mages where he's taking trades early. That'll definitely make him a bit weaker. I think that's good. I think Kassadin is just a really obnoxious champ, and I would not be upset if they completely deleted that champ. There's just not really like a fair way that champion gets represented. He's pretty much like just complete garbage for most of the game, and if he survives, he's like God mode later. Very easy to play, like not very mechanical. I would just rework him potentially. Like he'd be like, I like kind of like the idea of an anti-mage type of champ, but I don't know. He's just really obnoxious later on. So good, nerf him, get him out of there. I don't think he's like super oppressive right now, but once again, his design and his playstyle is just not good. I don't think for the game. Okay, Varus E. So it's interesting they chose to buff the E because this will not affect significantly either his on-hit build or his lethality build, because there's no scenario where you're maxing E first. So that's interesting. So basically just 10 extra damage for early trades, and then an extra 10 seconds off of his R. So I think Varus has some potential. Once again, I don't think he's that far out of the meta, right? I think he's decent. It's just, the meta is often just a game of inches, right? Like some stuff that just isn't played a lot doesn't necessarily mean that it's always terrible. It just means that something is just a little bit better, right? So, maybe Ashe is just a little bit better than Varus is right now. And so that's why everybody's playing Ashe. It's not that Varus is like unequivocally like no way you can play him. Now the win rate's pretty bad on him right now. But he's the type of champ where sometimes just a little bit of a nudge can really, put him over the top. So I don't think this is going to be insane on Varus, but it's probably okay. Who knows? Maybe people can go Man Immune Hurricane on him, like the trend on every other champ right now. It might actually kind of make a little more sense on Varus to do something like that, just because he actually does kind of need the mana early on, so he can wave clear with his Q and with his E. So it wouldn't be like a completely ridiculous idea to go like Mana into Hurricane into Infinity Edge or something like that, or even into Blade of the Ruined King. I don't know why people don't double down on the on-hit stuff. Like you very rarely see Mana and Blade of the Ruined King in the same build, but maybe he could get a Gensu's in there or something like that. That on-hit build I thought was pretty decent, right? Where he used to rush Blade of the Ruined King, and then like Gensu's and then Hurricane or something like that. So I don't know. I could see a Mana build with him, Mana Hurricane, and go from there. So we'll see. Interesting champ. Once again, once he's good, he has a very good kit with that ult. It's extremely good in team fights, so you got to watch out for him. And then Braum, this is actually pretty massive for Braum. This is a very big deal. 15 damage early game. He's already really good, like in the very early game, right? So if you put him with something like a Lucian, like he can tear it up in the early game, especially like level 1, level 2. He's very spooky. So especially against immobile champs that can't really run away. And if you were to pair him with something like a Senna, which is like the Glacial Augment Senna, who's going to be able to apply that slow to allow Braum to catch up and auto attack it. So Braum's, I could just envision a trading pattern with something like Braum Senna, where he hits him with the Q, starts walking up towards him, and then Senna auto attacks him. to add an additional slow, and then he gets close enough to start auto-attacking them. You know, I could see that potentially being really good. So that's very interesting. And then the mana cost on the Q, 10 extra mana per Q is actually quite nice as well. So now it's 45. So basically it's 45 mana to do 75 damage, whereas it used to be 55 mana to do 60 damage. So that's a much, much better ratio of mana to damage in the laning phase. So I don't necessarily think that Braum is going to become S tier again immediately, but this will certainly help him out quite a bit, especially with certain matchups. Particularly Lucian is really good with him, and Lucian's just a good champion overall right now. So we'll see. Interesting changes to Braum. Might make him a lot more viable for pro, and maybe he's worth taking a look at in certain comps for solo queue. But as per usual, right, you got to be a little careful with Tom and Braum in solo queue because usually they're balanced around pro. He has a hard time making plays. Like, his ult can make a play, but he usually can get outscaled by enchanters and just outmaneuvered by some of the other engaged champs. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. I think this looks pretty good overall. There are definitely some interesting things that are going on here that are worth considering. Does look like they're knocking down a couple of the kind of top-end, most problematic champions in different roles with the Lulu, the Katarina, Nunu. So we'll see how it shakes out. But that's going to be it. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.